Chuck Norris Walker, Texas Ranger, star leaves behind a fortune that makes his family cry. 9 days before he died, an 86-year-old man posted a video of himself sparring under the Hawaiian sun and told his fans he didn't age, he leveled up. 9 days later, the same man who had survived being declared dead by the internet more times than almost any other celebrity in history was actually gone. And the fortune he left behind, along with the story of how he built it, turned out to be far stranger and far more emotional than anyone expected. On March 19, 2026, Chuck Norris passed away at the age of 86. He had been hospitalized on the island of Kauai, Hawaii, after a sudden medical emergency, and within roughly a day he was gone. His family did not release a cause of death. What they released instead was a short statement thanking the world not for watching his movies, but for loving him. That single choice of words tells you almost everything about the difference between the character audiences knew and the man his family actually lost. This was not the first time the world thought Chuck Norris had died. Over the years, hoax articles claimed he had passed away in a car accident, during the pandemic, and in several other invented incidents that were never true. So when the real announcement came, plenty of people online assumed it was just another fake story. It wasn't. Multiple major outlets, including the Associated Press, CNN, and NPR, confirmed the news, and his family statement, posted to his official social media accounts, made it official. Tributes poured in almost immediately, from political figures to the network he had once taken to court. Which brings us to the question that financial and entertainment publications rushed to answer within hours. What did Chuck Norris actually leave behind? The widely reported figure, cited by outlets like Fortune and Celebrity Net Worth, puts his estate at approximately $70 million. But a number by itself doesn't explain much. What makes the story worth telling is how a shy, unremarkable kid from Oklahoma built that fortune, who is set to inherit it, and the almost unbelievable chain of events, including a courtroom fight with one of the biggest networks in television, that shaped where the money actually came from. Before any of that, there was just a boy who didn't seem destined for much of anything. Carlos Ray Norris was born on March 10, 1940, in the small town of Ryan, Oklahoma. He arrived with serious breathing complications and nearly didn't survive infancy. His mother worked hard to hold the family together while his father, a World War II veteran, struggled with alcohol and was often absent. Norris later described his childhood home as calmer when his father wasn't there, which says a great deal about what those early years were actually like. The family moved several times chasing work, eventually settling in Southern California, where Norris graduated high school in 1958 as a quiet, unassuming teenager with no particular athletic talent and no obvious path forward. That path appeared almost by accident. He enlisted in the Air Force the same year he married his high school girlfriend, Diane Holchek. The Air Force stationed him in South Korea, and it was there that he wandered into a martial arts class and found the thing that would define the rest of his life. He trained obsessively, earned his black belt within about a year, and later said it was the first time in his life he had accomplished something genuinely difficult entirely on his own. That sense of earned confidence followed him home. After his discharge in the early 1960s, Norris opened karate schools across Southern California, while also working toward a law enforcement career that never quite materialized. His schools grew into a respected chain, and along the way he taught celebrities, including Steve McQueen and Priscilla Presley. He became a multiple-time national karate champion, and it was that reputation that eventually caught the attention of another rising martial artist named Bruce Lee. The two met, trained together for years, and developed a friendship that changed the direction of Norris's life. Lee cast him as the villain in the climactic fight scene of Way of the Dragon, filmed in Rome in the early 1970s. The film became a massive commercial success on a tiny budget, and Norris, despite playing the character who loses the fight, became internationally recognizable almost overnight. When Lee died suddenly in 1973, Norris remained close to the family, and by his own accounts, spent time with Lee's young son Brandon in the years that followed. It was Steve McQueen, one of his former students, who pushed Norris to take acting seriously rather than treating film work as a side project. Norris studied acting, struggled to get his early films picked up by major studios, and in some cases had to help finance and distribute his own movies. Those gambles eventually paid off. By the early 1990s, he had appeared in more than 20 films and built a loyal audience. But the role that would define him in the eyes of most of the world hadn't happened yet. That role arrived in 1993 with Walker, Texas Ranger. The show almost died before it aired. Its original production company went bankrupt during the first season, and only a handful of episodes existed when the network nearly pulled the plug entirely. Then the premiere aired, pulled in a surprisingly large audience, and CBS found new partners to keep it alive. What followed was 9 seasons and more than 200 episodes, making it the first American primetime drama filmed entirely in Texas. Norris controlled much of the creative direction through his own production company, insisted on storylines consistent with his personal faith, and even sang the show's theme song himself. The show made Norris genuinely wealthy. Reports place his per-episode fee at roughly $375,000, along with a contractual share of the show's profits. Once syndication deals were added, with the series eventually airing in more than 100 countries, the franchise as a whole reportedly generated hundreds of millions of dollars in total revenue over its lifetime. That success is also where the story turns into a legal fight. In 2018, Norris sued CBS and Sony, alleging the companies owed him tens of millions of dollars in profits tied to the show's streaming and distribution revenue. Revenue his legal team argued had not been properly reported or shared with him for years. The case took roughly 5 years to resolve and was ultimately settled in 2023 under undisclosed terms. Whatever CBS ultimately paid to close that case is now considered part of the estate his family inherits. Beyond the show, Norris built wealth in ways that had nothing to do with Hollywood. He partnered with Christie Brinkley on a fitness equipment infomercial deal that ran for nearly 3 decades and sold millions of units worldwide, making it one of the longest-running celebrity fitness partnerships in television history. He also owned the Lone Wolf Ranch, roughly 1,000 acres in Navasota, Texas, which became the family's home base after Norris largely stepped away from Hollywood around 2012. Workers drilling on the ranch unexpectedly struck a massive underground aquifer, an accidental discovery that led Norris and his wife to found a bottled water company built directly on the property, now selling across the country. Then there's the Kauai vacation property, the same oceanfront home where he passed away, reportedly worth around $7 million on its own. Add in decades of film royalties, endorsement income, and book sales, and you start to see how a shy kid from Oklahoma ended up with a $70 million estate. No public will has been released, so most reporting relies on how Texas community property law typically works. Under that framework, a surviving spouse is generally entitled to half of the marital estate, with the rest divided among the children. Norris is survived by his wife, Gina O'Kelly, whom he married in 1998, and by 5 children total. His 2 eldest sons, Mike and Eric, came from his first marriage to Diane Holchek. His youngest children, twins Dakota and Danny Lee, were born in 2001 and grew up largely on the Texas ranch. And then there's Dina, his eldest daughter, whose story adds an entirely different layer to who Chuck Norris actually was. Dina was born in 1964, the result of a brief relationship Norris had before his first marriage fully ended. For years, she grew up without any contact with her father, at her mother's request, only learning the truth about her parentage as a teenager and being told not to reach out. It wasn't until Norris's divorce from Diane became public that Dina eventually made contact as an adult. Norris has spoken publicly about welcoming her into the family and has described the moment of finally meeting her as one of the most emotional experiences of his life. In later years, Dina and her family were included in his public life, appearing alongside him in family photos, including ones taken in Hawaii. Norris's personal life in his final years was marked by loss as much as anything else. His mother passed away in 2024. His first wife, Diane Holchek, with whom he had remained on good terms despite their divorce decades earlier, died in December 2025 after a long illness. Just 3 months later, Norris himself was gone. In the span of little more than a year, He lost both his mother and the mother of his two eldest sons before following them in the early spring of 2026. One story that shaped his final decade in a way most fans never fully understood involves his wife, Gina. In the early 2010s, Gina underwent a series of MRI scans that used a gadolinium-based contrast dye, a substance meant to pass through the body harmlessly. According to statements from the family, Gina experienced severe and escalating health problems afterward, and doctors struggled for years to identify a clear cause. Norris has spoken publicly about the toll this took on their family and about pursuing alternative treatment options after conventional medicine failed to provide answers. The Norrises later filed a lawsuit against multiple pharmaceutical companies related to gadolinium contrast agents, a case that was part of a broader wave of similar concerns raised with federal regulators around that time. The lawsuit was eventually withdrawn without a settlement, but it remains one of the more personal and lesser-known chapters of Norris's later life, one that reportedly cost the family a significant amount of money in medical care alone. Alongside the business ventures and the legal battles, Norris also built something that had nothing to do with profit. In 1990, he founded what eventually became known as Kickstart Kids, a martial arts and character development program aimed at giving young people in Texas schools structure, discipline, and self-esteem. Over more than 3 decades, the program grew to serve dozens of schools and well over 100,000 students. By most accounts, including his own, it was the achievement he was proudest of more than any film role or television character. Norris was also a famously polarizing public figure outside of his film and television work. He was outspoken about his Christian faith, was a longtime supporter of conservative political causes, wrote a political column for nearly 2 decades, and endorsed several Republican presidential candidates over the years. Those political views made him a hero to some fans and a controversial figure to others, and that debate reignited almost immediately after his death, with some commentary focusing more on his politics than his career. It's a reminder that even in death, how people remember a public figure often depends heavily on which parts of their life they choose to focus on. What's clear, regardless of where anyone stands on that debate, is that the fortune Chuck Norris leaves behind wasn't built from one lucky break. It came from a martial arts obsession that started in a foreign military base, a friendship with Bruce Lee that nearly ended his career before it began, a television show that almost got canceled in its first season, a courtroom fight against one of the biggest networks in the country, and an accidental discovery of water underneath a ranch in rural Texas. Every piece of that $70 million estate has a story behind it, and most of those stories involve Norris refusing to quit at moments when quitting would have been the easier choice. His family's decision to thank the world for loving him, rather than for watching him, wasn't just a nice sentence in a statement. It was, in a lot of ways, the whole point. The action star, the meme, the tough guy who supposedly never lost a fight, was also a father who spent decades caring for a wife through a frightening and mysterious illness, a man who welcomed a daughter he'd been kept from for years, and someone who spent his final years mostly out of the spotlight, at home, with the people he actually loved. The estate will keep making headlines as it settles. The ranch, the water company, the Hawaii property, the film and television royalties, and whatever remained from the CBS settlement are all now part of a legacy his family is left to manage without him. But the number itself was never really the story. The story was how an unremarkable kid from Oklahoma turned discipline into an entire life, and how at the very end, the people who loved him most just wanted the world to know that the man behind the legend was worth loving, not just watching. What do you think Chuck Norris will actually be remembered for the most? The movies, the show, the memes, or the man his family described in that final statement? Let us know in the comments.